First class isn't for people like you. That's what the flight attendant said before ripping the ticket of a black woman in a t-shirt, in front of dozens of silent passengers. What she didn't know, that woman was Nadine Ryan, CEO billionaire, and 25% shareholder of the very airline they worked for. And 5 minutes later, the crew that mocked her would be unemployed, in front of the entire plane and the entire internet. This isn't just a flight. It's a reckoning. You don't belong in first class, Karen said coolly, then tore the perfectly valid ticket in half, right in front of the woman, as if it were nothing more than worthless scraps. Her contemptuous stare locked onto the plainly dressed woman of color, in a black t-shirt and jeans, unaware that in less than 5 minutes, that very woman would fire her on the spot in front of all the passengers, the crew, and a swarm of live streaming cameras. This wasn't merely a scuffle or a misunderstanding. It was the death knell for every wrong Skyward Airlines had worked so hard to conceal. Because that unassuming passenger was no ordinary flyer. She was Nadine Ryan, powerful CEO billionaire, and the airline's shareholder. Nadine Ryan holds 25% of the prestigious Skyward Airlines. Not only is she famed for her razor-sharp, decisive leadership, she's also renowned for standing up against social injustices, especially racism and prejudice. Recently, serious allegations have surfaced accusing Skyward staff of covert discrimination against passengers. Most victims have been travelers of color who, despite having valid documents and the means to pay, were treated rudely, demeaned, and sometimes forced to relinquish their seats to wealthier white passengers. Recognizing that this was not just an ethical crisis, but a jeopardy to the airline's reputation and very survival one she helped build, Nadine decided to act herself. Instead of convening tense boardroom meetings or issuing remote directives, she chose a bolder approach, boarding a Chicago-Los Angeles flight incognito to secretly investigate and witness firsthand what was happening within her own company. That morning, Nadine walked into the airport in simple attire, a black t-shirt, jeans, and plain sneakers. No flashy jewelry, no entourage. She blended seamlessly into the crowd. With a first-class ticket purchased in her real name, she calmly approached the gate, ready to face whatever truths lay ahead. What she didn't expect was that minutes later she would become the direct target of a confrontation unlike anything Skyward Airlines had ever seen, and that her fight for justice would forever change the airline's culture. Nadine stepped lightly through the airplane door into the first-class cabin, its luxury and refinement laid out before her. Soft, ambient lighting dancing across rows of premium cream leather seats. Her sharp eyes swept the space. Everything looked so flawless it almost felt unreal. But she knew all too well that behind this polished veneer lurked the darkness she had come to expose. Before she could reach her seat, the head flight attendant strode toward her, expression icy and disdainful. Her name was Karen Anderson, a white woman in her 30s with perfectly pulled back blonde hair and a navy uniform without a single wrinkle. Karen was known throughout the airline for her pristine appearance and equally for her habit of looking down on any passenger she deemed unworthy of first-class status. Standing squarely in Nadine's path, Karen's gaze traveled from head to toe with undisguised scrutiny. A suffocating silence fell over the cabin. Then Karen's voice rang out cold as ice. "Ma'am, first class isn't for people like you." Her curt declaration sounded like a warning bell in the hush, and nearby passengers turned in unison, curiosity and shock written on their faces. Some exchanged uneasy glances, hardly believing what they'd just heard. Nadine remained perfectly still, her expression calm and composed, not a hint of hesitation or surprise. She had faced far tougher challenges in her career, yet this blatant injustice still constricted her chest even as her face betrayed nothing. "I'm sorry," Nadine asked evenly, giving Karen every chance to explain or retract her words. But Karen only grew more resolute, locking eyes with Nadine. "I think you know exactly what I mean. This is first class reserved for truly special passengers. You'd be far more comfortable back in economy." Karen's voice rose as if she wanted the entire cabin to hear her verdict, deliberately pressuring Nadine to back down under the watchful eyes around them. Whispers rippled through the nearby seats, and judgmental stares pinballed toward Nadine from every direction. Quietly, Nadine slipped her first-class ticket from her jacket pocket and held it out to Karen, hoping that undeniable proof would end this absurdity, once and for all. But instead of taking it, Karen sneered at the paper and challenged her. "No need, Miss Ryan. We know your little tricks. A fake ticket doesn't make you first class." With that contemptuous jerk, Karen snatched the ticket from Nadine's hand and tore it in two. The ripping of paper echoed through the cabin like a slap in the face, prompting some passengers to leap up in astonishment. At that moment, a young flight attendant named Jason Miller sauntered over, a mocking smile playing on his youthful face. Folding his arms, he surveyed Nadine from head to toe and sneered. "You really thought rocking jeans and a cheap t-shirt would let you sneak into first class? Next time you feel like pretending to be wealthy, spend a little more." Jason's derogatory remark only ramped up the tension. Nadine still gave no outward reaction. Instead, she met Karen's and Jason's eyes with steely resolve. She understood now more than ever that this was not just an isolated incident, but a prime example of the racial discrimination she had sworn to root out from the airline she partly owned. As the cabin crackled with palpable tension, Nadine took a slow, measured breath and silently resolved to see this matter through to the very end so that the truth would be laid bare for all to see. In just a few short minutes, those standing before her, Karen Anderson, Jason Miller, and their accomplices, would realize they had made the gravest mistake of their lives, a mistake whose consequences they could never have imagined. The sound of the ticket tearing in two rang out dry and brutal, as if it shredded the last threads of Nadine's already fragile patience. The fragments fluttered down onto the plush navy blue carpet, stark white reminders of Karen Anderson's unbelievable contempt and arrogance. Nadine stood silent for a moment, the ache in her chest not born of humiliation, but of the painful realization that this toxic culture had taken root so deeply within her own organization. She bent down calmly, picked up a torn half of the ticket, and met Karen's gaze with steady eyes, waiting for an explanation or at least an apology. But Karen did not flinch. Her cold stare grew even more defiant as she addressed the cabin, loudly ensuring every passenger could hear, "You can't fool us with this fake ticket." Her proclamation resounded like a bold declaration, not only to humiliate Nadine, but to warn anyone else who might dare think they belonged in the elite section. A few passengers shifted uneasily. Some raised their eyebrows, unable to believe the arrogance unfolding before them. At that moment, Jason Miller, the young flight attendant known for his cocky, disrespectful attitude, stepped up beside Karen. A mocking smile spread across his youthful face as he sneered condescendingly. "You really thought jeans and a cheap t-shirt would get you into first class? Next time you pretend to be rich, invest a little more." Jason turned to Karen with a triumphant look as though he'd just won some petty battle. His poisonous words cut through the tension already strung tight in the cabin, making several passengers visibly uncomfortable and uneasy. Nadine remained remarkably composed. She gently retrieved her ID card from her wallet, along with her sleek black metal Skyward Airlines Elite member card, and held them both out to Karen and Jason. "You can verify my information in your system. I'm confident this will clear up any doubt." Karen glanced dismissively at the metal card, but refused to check it or acknowledge the truth. Instead, she smirked at Jason and replied coldly, "Oh, I don't need to check. We see plenty of fake cards like that. I won't let someone like you break our first-class rules." Jason immediately chimed in, nodding and taunting. "That's right. Every time people like you flash a few plastic cards, they think we'll be fooled. First class isn't for show-offs." Their words weren't just directed at Nadine. They laid bare the deep-seated prejudice and the hidden culture of discrimination lurking beneath Skyward Airlines' glossy surface. Nadine felt a crystal-clear certainty. This wasn't a one-off injustice, but a system, a form of power deliberately crushing the vulnerable. Behind Karen's icy confidence lays a twisted thinking where one's worth was judged by skin color and appearance. Nadine knew she couldn't allow this to continue for another day at the airline she partly owned. She took a measured breath and spoke each word with firm politeness. "I'm asking one last time, please verify my credentials." Karen tilted her head and shot back defiantly, her voice loud enough for the entire cabin to hear. "Either you leave first class now, or I'll have security escort you out." Nadine fell silent, a heavy weight settling in her chest. Not from fear or anger, but from the knowledge that the battle ahead would be fierce, yet absolutely necessary. Within minutes, Nadine Ryan would make the most important call of her life. A call not just to defend her own dignity, but to expose the painful, long-concealed truth behind Skyward Airlines' gleaming facade, a truth she would no longer allow to persist under her watch. The air in first class grew icy still after Karen's cold threat. Nadine remained motionless, meeting Karen's smug gaze as if searching for a flicker of compassion or even a shred of common sense. but all she found was ruthless determination. From that moment, it was clear this wasn't a mere argument. It had become a high-stakes showdown. Just then, heavy footsteps echoed from the cockpit, shattering the tense silence. A commanding-looking middle-aged man in a captain's uniform appeared. Brad Collins, a veteran Skywing pilot known for his ironclad discipline and just as notorious for his inflexible, often heartless approach, he cast a steely glance at Nadine, sizing her up like a threat to be eliminated. Without checking the torn ticket or Nadine's documents, Brad's authoritative voice cut through the cabin. "No more arguing. I want this passenger off the plane immediately, delivered with absolute certainty, no hesitation, no questions." His order made the atmosphere even more suffocating. Karen's lips curled into a triumphant smile as she turned to Nadine, eyes alight with victory. Beside her, Jason Miller chuckled under his breath, arms folded as though watching a private performance he'd helped stage. Less than a minute later, a female security officer appeared at the cabin door. Linda Foster, an airport security pro famed for her tough-as-nails attitude and zero tolerance for disruptions, strode forward in her crisply pressed Navy uniform. Her stun gun holstered at her side, the very picture of authority. Stopping before Nadine, Linda's voice rang out cold and clear, plunging the cabin into absolute silence. "You have exactly 1 minute to leave." Nadine stood her ground, looking Linda in the eye without a flicker of fear or hesitation. Part of her recognized that Linda was merely executing orders, but she also felt disappointment at how rashly both crew and security had handled the situation. "Before I go," Nadine said evenly but firmly, "I would appreciate one more opportunity to verify my credentials." Brad remained impassive, dismissing her with a curt wave. "We don't have time for games. My decision stands. Comply." Karen's arrogant grin widened as she watched Nadine's isolation, and Jason's smirk grew more pronounced. But Nadine felt neither anger nor defeat. Instead, a crystal-clear resolve welled up inside her that she would eradicate the deep-seated racism festering within the very company she helped build. This was no longer about personal pride. It was a moral imperative she would not compromise. Taking a steady breath, Nadine fixed her gaze on each of them. Karen's smug face, Jason's mocking grin, Brad's unyielding posture, and Linda's steely glare. She knew that in just a few minutes, these prejudiced power wielders would come to realize the gravity of their mistake. And when the truth finally came to light, Nadine Ryan would stand not as the unassuming woman before them, but as the ultimate authority ready to reshape the future of Skywing Airlines and everyone within it. The tension in first class froze completely under Linda's cold, overpowering stare. Nadine stood unmoved, locking eyes with Karen's smug expression as if searching for a flicker of compassion or even a shred of reason, but finding only ruthless resolve. From this moment on, it was clear this wasn't just an argument. It had become a fierce showdown. Then a soft, trembling voice cut through the oppressive silence. "I saw her ticket scan as valid. Please check again." All eyes swung toward the speaker. Emily Turner, a young flight attendant who'd been with Skywing Airlines less than a month, pressed herself against a nearby seat. Her cheeks were flushed, her eyes wide with fear, and her hands clenched to hide their tremor. She never imagined she'd speak up in such a way, but the truth she'd witnessed compelled her to act. Karen whipped around, her gaze icy and threatening. In Karen's eyes, Emily's interruption wasn't just rude. It was a direct challenge to her power in front of passengers and colleagues alike. With an authoritative chill, Karen snapped, "Emily, you're new here. Stay out of this." Her words struck Emily like a blade, warning that her fledgling career could be destroyed instantly. Jason sneered, mocking Emily's naivete at daring to confront such power. Emily lowered her head for a heartbeat, her body shaking with the pressure, her heart pounding so loudly she felt the whole cabin could hear. Then she dared to lift her eyes and met Nadine's calm, determined gaze. And something stronger than fear surged within her. Taking a deep breath, Emily found her courage and spoke again, this time clearly and firmly. "I don't mean to cause trouble, but I actually saw Miss Ryan's ticket validate at the scanner. We should check the system again before jumping to conclusions." A few nearby passengers nodded in agreement, and quiet whispers began to ripple through the cabin. Karen's eyes darkened as she realized she was losing control of the situation. Instead of backing down, she stepped up to Emily, her voice low and cutting. "A final warning. Emily, know your place. I don't want to hear another word." Emily trembled, her eyes glistening. Yet she refused to back down, though she seemed fragile outwardly. Inside, she was powered by a steadfast belief in doing what was right. Her small act of bravery sent a silent yet powerful wave through the cabin. Nadine looked at Emily with profound gratitude. Emily's courageous voice had not only defended her, but also proved that even the greatest authority couldn't silence the truth when backed by courage and justice. In that moment, Nadine realized she was no longer alone in her fight. Standing beside her were not titles or ranks, but the support of people like Emily Turner. Small yet unbreakable souls willing to stand for what's right no matter the cost. And in that very instant, Nadine knew this seemingly unwinnable confrontation was about to turn a new page, one where the truth would finally emerge regardless of the price. While Emily still trembled under Karen's piercing glare, tension rippled through the first-class cabin like invisible waves. Yet the young attendant's rare act of courage unexpectedly sparked a strong reaction among the passengers, people who had been silently watching and wondering what lay behind this unsettling scene. In the seat just behind them sat Sarah Johnson, a 35-year-old white American woman with light brown hair cascading over her shoulders. From the moment Nadine stepped on board, Sarah had been observing everything intently. A well-known travel and social justice blogger with tens of thousands of followers, she was especially sensitive to signs of racism, injustice, or abuse of power. Beside Sarah sat Tom Carter, a young businessman whose stern face and outraged eyes betrayed his shock at what he was witnessing. After hearing Emily's brave, trembling words, Sarah and Tom exchanged a meaningful glance. They both knew exactly what needed to happen next. Sarah immediately pulled her phone from her purse, her hand shaking with a mixture of anger and excitement. She tapped her camera app and began recording the entire scene. Within seconds, every crucial detail, Nadine's calm, resolute expression, Karen and Captain Brad's cold stars, Jason's mocking smirk, and Emily's courageous tremble was captured in Sarah's video. She added no commentary. The images spoke more powerfully than any words could. At the same moment, Tom did the same from a different angle, ensuring not a single moment went undocumented. His grip on the phone was so tight that his knuckles turned white. Though strangers until that moment, both Sarah and Tom understood that silence would mean complicity. Once they had enough footage, Sarah swiftly opened her social media app and posted her video with a bold, clear hashtag number, #WingScandal. Tom followed suit, uploading his own clip with the same tag. In less than a minute, their videos began attracting widespread attention online. What started as a few dozen views exploded into hundreds, then thousands of shares and comments. Outraged reactions flooded every platform, condemning the crew's racist behavior and contempt for passengers. "This is horrifying. How could a major airline let this happen? I can't believe what that woman had to endure. Skywing scandal should be a warning to any airline that dares treat passengers with prejudice." In the blink of an eye, the hashtag Skywing scandal trended across social media, drawing in celebrities and major anti-racism organizations. News of the incident shot to the top of trending lists, forcing public scrutiny onto the misconduct that had just played out mid-flight. Meanwhile, Karen and Jason remained oblivious to the storm they had unleashed. They reveled in their ill-gotten sense of power, unaware that it was crumbling under the weight of public opinion and justice. From the start, Nadine had maintained her composure. Now she caught Sarah's and Tom's eyes and offered them a subtle nod of gratitude, knowing that their support was the turning point needed to bring the truth to light. The cabin was still, but the silence had transformed from fearful quiet to one charged with outrage and resolve. In the minutes to come, everyone aligned with prejudice and abuse would face a reckoning. Even the smallest voices of truth, when raised with courage, have the power to shake an unjust system to its core. As the passengers' murmurs swelled, Karen felt a flicker of unease beneath her once unshakable facade of authority. It was darted to Sarah and Tom, who were engrossed in filming every moment. A sliver of doubt crossed Karen's mind, but she quickly cast it aside, replacing it with a defiant arrogance. She was certain she still controlled the situation, that nothing could overthrow her power. Now Nadine, however, stood perfectly still, radiating quiet strength. There wasn't a hint of panic or fear in her gaze. If anything, each passing second only showcased her remarkable composure under the mounting pressure from Brad, Linda, and Karen. With unhurried grace, she reached into her jacket pocket, pulled out her phone, and moved as if performing a routine gesture in the eye of a storm. She dialed her special assistant, Jennifer Lee, her constant ally in Skywing's most critical board meetings. In a calm, clear voice, Nadine spoke slowly but decisively, loud enough for Karen and Brad to hear. Jennifer informed the board immediately. They need to know what's happening. Nadine's words, though soft, struck like a gale, shattering the tense silence. Karen sneered, dismissing it as a bluff, a desperate ploy to escape her predicament. She stepped forward, eyes full of mockery. "Were you calling the police? We're the only ones enforcing the rules here." Nadine said nothing, her eyes steady and razor-sharp. She knew words were unnecessary. The actions to follow would speak far louder. A few seconds later, Jennifer's voice crackled over the line, solemn and firm, just loud enough for Karen and Brad to catch every word. "Nadine, the board has received the viral videos. They're in emergency session and awaiting your next instruction." Karen throws her mocking smile, wavering. Brad's stern features tightened in surprise and doubt. A strange hush fell over the cabin as passengers began to sense that something far more serious was unfolding behind this routine confrontation. Karen shook her head, attempting to mask her disc with a forced laugh. "Oh, I'm impressed. Who else are you going to pretend to be? A meaningless phone call won't change a thing." Nadine remained silent, her gaze unblinking. Before Karen could retort, her phone buzzed again with a voice known to every Skywing executive. "Nadine, this is Michael Harris of the board. We've been monitoring the incident. We confirm your identity. CEO Nadine Ryan, and are preparing to take decisive action. You have full authority to proceed as you see fit." Michael's words thundered through the cabin like a bolt of lightning, striking at Karen and Brad's hubris. Karen's face drained of color, her confident demeanor gone in an instant, replaced by palpable panic. Brad stumbled back, nearly losing his balance under the weight of this revelation. "Everyone." Emily trembling in place. Sarah and Tom still filming, and every other passenger held their breath. Many now recognized the true stature of Nadine Ryan, the powerful CEO confronting her own airline's disgraceful discrimination. In that moment, Karen and Jason understood the gravity of their mistake. Once spiteful and overconfident, they now appeared small and pitiable before Nadine's unwavering resolve. This same woman whose fate they had arrogantly toyed with. The cabin seemed suspended on the verge of a great storm, one that would sweep away the deep-seated prejudice, arrogance, and wrongdoing within Skywing Airlines. And with her unshakable calm, Nadine Ryan was ready to bring the truth into the light, no matter the cost to those who had wrought this injustice. The moment Michael Harris's serious voice came through Nadine's phone speaker, the cabineer seemed to freeze entirely. Karen's eyes, just moments before, gleaming with cocky confidence, quickly clouded over with confusion and outright fear. The hand she'd raised to signal Linda to remove Nadine abruptly stalled mid-air, trembling for a heartbeat, before slipping back to her side. "Nadine, the board has received the evidence from the viral videos. We're ready to take action." The board's weighty declaration struck like a hammer blow, shattering the false veneer of authority Karen and Brad had erected. Brad Collins, the veteran captain known for his icy decisiveness, now looked so tense he gripped the seat back to steady himself. He turned to Karen, panic flashing in his eyes, unable to believe how swiftly the situation had reversed. In that instant, the power he'd relied on to make his misguided decision collapsed entirely. Karen's jaw dropped and she forced a strained laugh. Part mockery, part desperate bid to salvage her pride. "Oh, a call from the board. How impressive. But none of this changes the fact that you don't belong in first class." Her tone dripped with stubborn defiance, the earlier arrogance replaced by hollow obstinacy. Nadine said nothing, holding the phone calmly, her gaze icy and unwavering. She knew the board's word was final, an authoritative verdict capable of exposing every layer of injustice. Jennifer Lee's voice came through again, calm but carrying the absolute authority of Skywing's board chair. "Nadine, this is Michael Harris. We confirm that you are Nadine Ryan, CEO of Skywing Airlines and one of its largest shareholders. The discriminatory actions that just occurred are a grave violation of our core values and ethical standards. The board will not tolerate any behavior that disrespects our customers, especially such blatant racism." As his words ended, the cabin erupted in astonished whispers. Some passengers raised their phones to continue filming this unprecedented moment. Others exchanged looks of shock and outrage at the crew's misconduct. Karen's face drained of color. Her confidence and authority evaporated. She glanced around desperately for support from Jason or Brad, but found only silence. Jason, who had sneered moments before, now looked equally pale, unable to meet anyone's eyes. Brad stood rooted in place, stunned and disappointed in himself. The seasoned captain who prided himself on discipline now realized he had betrayed those very principles. In the heavy silence that followed, Nadine lowered the phone and spoke, her voice calm but resonant with absolute authority. "I hope everyone here understands that no one has the right to let their prejudice and racism override another person's dignity. I, Nadine Ryan, on behalf of Skyward Airlines, will not tolerate this." Her declaration rang with unwavering certainty, extinguishing any hope Karen, Jason, or Brad had of regaining control. Those who once wielded authority now stood exposed. Their grievous misjudgment laid bare. In mere minutes, the tables had turned completely. No longer was Nadine the unassuming passenger. She had reclaimed the power that was rightfully hers, leading an uncompromising fight against the prejudice and injustice entrenched in Skyward Airlines. And she knew this fateful phone call was only the beginning of the sweeping changes to come. The instant Nadine Ryan's icy commanding words echoed through the cabin, the first-class cabin dropped into a breath-stealing silence. Every passenger's gaze snapped to Karen, Jason, and Brad, once the ultimate authorities in this flight, now frozen as if crushed under the weight of Nadine's decree. Karen, the most confident, powerful member of the crew, looked unable to believe her ears. Her lips trembled, unable to form a sound. Panic and desperation swam in her eyes as she realized the power and career she'd spent years building were dissolving before her. Her legs shook so violently she nearly collapsed, clutching at a nearby seat to steady herself. Brad Collins, the famously stern, disciplined captain, was a completely different man. His face went deathly pale, his body stiff, his eyes woody and filled with helpless regret. He understood that his own arrogance and carelessness had cost him everything. His reputation, his career, even the self-respect he'd forged over decades in aviation. Jason Miller, the young flight attendant whose arrogance and sneers had opened this ordeal, was now utterly silent. His overconfidence had vanished, replaced by utter bewilderment and fear so intense he dared not meet Nadine's eyes again. That tense stillness shattered when Nadine spoke again. Her voice still cold but even sharper, slicing through their shattered pride like a blade. "Anyone involved in this discrimination and abuse of power is terminated immediately. You have 5 minutes to leave the aircraft, and you will receive official notice of your contract termination today." Karen cast a pleading, desperate look at Nadine, her lips quivering as if begging for another chance. But Nadine remained unmoved, her steady gaze confirming that her decision was final. Brad, once unfazed by any crisis, now hung his head in shame and disappointment. Even Jason, who had once sneered so confidently, stood silent. Fists clenched so tightly, his knuckles seemed white, fully aware that his once promising future in aviation had vanished in an instant. A few passengers, overcome with emotion, resumed filming this historic moment, flooding social media with new posts. Skywing's scandal was quickly joined by an even more powerful hashtag, Justice Served. Comments praising Nadine Reed's decisive just action spread like wildfire. Amid the charged atmosphere, young flight attendant Emily Turner, who had trembled moments before, looked at Nadine with reverent admiration and gratitude. She understood that Nadine's fearless stand had defended not just one woman's dignity, but reaffirmed faith and fairness for countless others. Airport security officer Linda Foster, who had been poised to remove Nadine by force, now stood motionless, clearly rattled. She realized how close she had come to participating in a grave injustice, and silently thanked her luck that she'd stopped short. Nadine glanced at her wristwatch, then spoke again coolly, but with unmistakable authority, as if ringing down the curtain on this storm. "Your time is up. I suggest you leave now." Her final command sounded like a gavel drop, signaling the absolute end of the crew's unjust power. Karen, Brad and Jason had no choice but to gather their belongings, slowly, painfully, under the judging eyes of the passengers they had so grossly offended. As the three of them trudged toward the exit, the cabin remained silent. But now it was a silence rich with meaning. The triumph of justice, the power of courage, and the unmistakable message Nadine Ryan had sent to all of Skyward Airlines that any act of injustice or discrimination, no matter how small, would be met with a steep price. And Nadine knew that this was the pivotal moment, the beginning of a sweeping revolution she would never abandon until Skyward Airlines had purged every trace of prejudice and injustice from its heart and soul. As Karen, Brad and Jason's figures finally disappeared beyond the cabin door, the tension in first class gave way to collective sighs of relief. Nadine remained standing, her cold gaze following the three as they trudged away, each step marking the moment they lost everything. Yet she knew this wasn't the end. The most crucial task now was to expose the full truth transparently and unequivocally, so nothing like this could ever happen again. Just as the atmosphere began to calm, a small, trembling figure stepped forward. It was Emily Turner, the young flight attendant, who only minutes ago had been paralyzed by fear. Now her eyes sparkled with determination even as her hands shook. Emily approached. Nadine took a steadying breath and held out her phone. "Miss Ryan," she said softly but firmly, "I have critical proof. I recorded Karen and Jason conspiring to delete your seat information from the system to justify removing you from first class." Instantly the cabin fell into stunned silence. Every pair of eyes fixed on Emily and the tiny phone in her unsteady grip. Nadine gave her an encouraging nod. "Play the recording, Emily." Emily's voice wavered at first. Then she steadied herself and hit play. In the hush, the voices came through clear. "Just erase her name from the seat list, Jason. Someone like her doesn't belong here. A quick tweak in the system. No one will ever find out." Karen's cold, confident tone. "You're right, Karen. No one's going to believe a casually dressed woman of color is a first-class passenger. Piece of cake." Jason's mocking laugh. The recording ended and the cabin erupted in whispers of disbelief. Passengers exchanged incredulous looks. The raw, bitter truth was laid bare. No one could deny or excuse Karen and Jason's blatant racism. Emily bowed her head, tears glistening in her eyes. Whether from stress or emotion, it was hard to tell. But she knew her action could change her career's course forever. When she looked up, she met Nadine's gaze and saw nothing but pride and respect. Nadine gently placed a hand on Emily's shoulder, her voice resonant and sincere for all to hear. "You did exactly the right thing, Emily. Skywing needs people like you." Her praise washed over Emily like a warm current, easing the tension in her young heart. Fellow passengers nodded in agreement. A few even offered soft applause honoring Emily's courageous stand. Linda Foster, the security officer who had been poised to haul Nadine away, now stood frozen in awkward shame. She realized how close she'd been to enabling a grave injustice and silently thanked her conscience for stopping her. Nadine turned to face the entire cabin, her voice ringing with determination. "We have just witnessed a painful but necessary truth. Such behavior will never be tolerated at Skyward Airlines again. I promise you this airline will never allow prejudice to dictate the treatment of our passengers." Her declaration landed like a powerful proclamation. Everyone gathered sensed its weight. They knew they'd just witnessed history. A turning point that would reshape not only Skyward Airlines, but also how people treat one another in society. Emily stood quietly beside Nadine. Her shoulders still trembling, not from fear anymore, but because she understood she had done the right thing. From this moment on, she was no longer just a trainee flight attendant. She was a symbol of courage, proof that even the smallest action can spark great change. And Nadine, looking out at the passengers, whose faith she had just restored, knew that today was only the beginning. She was ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, to ensure Skyward Airlines would not only be the finest airline in the sky, but also the fairest one for all. Nadine's forceful declaration still reverberated through the cabin, leaving a powerful impression of justice and courage on every passenger. In that emotionally charged moment, Nadine turned to Linda Foster, the security officer who only moments ago had stood ready to enforce a grave decision. Nadine's gaze bore no accusation, but it carried enough authority to leave no room for hesitation. "Linda," Nadine said calmly, yet with unmistakable command, meeting Linda's eyes as the officer stood frozen at her side. "Escort these people off the plane immediately. This is no longer a request, it's an order." Linda Foster, known for her strict professionalism, felt her heart tighten for the first time. She understood that one wrong call could jeopardize the career and reputation she'd worked so hard to build. Linda locked eyes with Nadine, then gave a small, resolute nod. An unspoken promise that she grasped the gravity of what she'd witnessed. With firm determination, Linda faced Karen, Brad, and Jason. Her voice was serious but subdued, as if granting them a sliver of dignity in their final moments on this flight. "Please follow me off the aircraft now." Karen, nearly drained of strength, bowed her head and began to walk away in utter shame. Her face was ashen, her expression hollow. Any trace of former pride now utterly vanished. Her heavy, trembling steps testified to the bitter cost of abusing power and acting on prejudice. Brad Collins and Jason Miller fared no better. Both fell into step behind Karen, their eyes clouded with regret and humiliation. Brad, the veteran captain, looked decades older in those few minutes, as if the weight of his mistake had aged him overnight. Jason kept his head bowed, too unnerved to meet anyone's gaze. His former arrogance had crumbled under the harsh light of truth. Linda led the disgraced trio down the aisle. None dared glance back. Dozens of passengers still held up their phones, capturing every painful final step. Those lenses were their verdicts, recording the moment these three faced public accountability. The cabin remained deathly silent, but that stillness felt heavier and more meaningful than any words. Everyone knew they had witnessed a rare moment of justice when the guilty at last paid for their wrongdoing. Once the door closed behind Karen, Brad, and Jason, the tension finally began to ebb. Linda returned and stood briefly in the doorway, her face etched with genuine remorse. "Miss Ryan," she said quietly, "I sincerely apologize for my actions. I nearly made an irreparable mistake. I fully understand my responsibility now, and I'm prepared to accept whatever consequences follow." Nadine regarded Linda for a long moment. Her gaze softened slightly. As an acknowledgement that Linda, despite her lapse, still had the chance to make things right, in a voice both compassionate and unwavering, Nadine replied, "Linda, you've just learned the most important lesson of your career. Skyward Airlines will never tolerate wrongdoing, but we are always ready to give a second chance to those who do the right thing and stand for justice." Linda nodded, feeling a profound relief. From this moment on, she vowed never to let herself slip so far again. She recognized how fortunate she was to still have the opportunity to redeem herself. Nadine then turned back to address all the passengers, her voice clear and resolute. "I want to apologize sincerely for what you've just experienced. Skyward Airlines is committed to thoroughly reviewing and eradicating any form of discrimination. Today we've learned a vital lesson. Every person deserves respect and fair treatment, regardless of appearance, race, or social position." Her words were met with enthusiastic applause. The early attention melted into renewed faith and hope for the airline's future. Nadine knew her work was far from over, but at least she had laid a solid foundation for the sweeping reforms Skyward so desperately needed, and she was ready to carry on this challenging yet profoundly meaningful journey. After the warm applause of the passengers died down, Nadine stood in the first-class cabin, taking in the faces of everyone who had just shared an emotional journey. Her expression was no longer stern or cold, but sincere, full of faith and unwavering resolve. She inhaled deeply and spoke clearly, her voice carrying authority. "Today I stood up against injustice not just for myself, but for everyone who has ever endured discrimination. No one deserves to be treated this way because of their appearance or their race." Her words resonated through the cabin not only as an affirmation, but as a profound message of ethics and responsibility. The passengers felt the power of her statement, an atmosphere of light and relief, replacing the fear and tension they had just experienced. Beside her, Emily Turner still stood quietly, eyes wide with wonder and emotion at having become part of this historic moment. Nadine turned to the young flight attendant, gently laying a hand on her shoulder, her gaze full of gratitude and trust. "And it's thanks to people like Emily, those brave enough to defend the truth despite the risks, that justice can prevail. Emily, I am pleased to promote you immediately. From this moment on, you will take on an important role at Skyward Airlines as a living symbol of the courage and integrity we aspire to." Emily froze for an instant, unable to believe her ears. Then thunderous applause erupted across the cabin, heartfelt and enthusiastic, honoring her courageous act. Emily felt her heart swell with pride and emotion. She bowed her head in thanks, cheeks flushed, her eyes shining with happiness and newfound confidence. The passengers cheering continued, a clear show of respect and admiration for Nadine's bold, meaningful decision. In that moment, everyone witnessed a fundamental truth. True power does not lie in titles or wealth, but in courage, ethics, and steadfast commitment to justice. Security Officer Linda Foster stepped forward as well. her initial sternness replaced by respect and a deep awareness of her duty. She nodded quietly, a silent pledge never to repeat such a mistake. Nadine turned back to address the passengers, offering a warm, genuine smile. "I know today's flight didn't go as you expected, but I hope we all leave here with an important message. Every one of us deserves respect and fair treatment, regardless of race, status, or appearance. From today onward, Skyward Airlines commits to being a model in the aviation industry, not only for our service quality, but for respect and equality for every passenger." Her closing words drew resounding applause. Some passengers even rose to their feet, fully endorsing the powerful message she had shared. They understood they had witnessed more than a memorable story. They had seen the beginning of a new era, one where fairness and respect stand above all. As Nadine returned to her seat, the cabin atmosphere settled back to normal. But everyone knew they had witnessed a pivotal turning point, a historic moment that would be remembered as a testament to real leadership and courage. Nadine herself understood that her journey was far from over. But now she felt completely confident and ready to lead Skyward Airlines into a new future. One defined not only by business excellence, but by the way we treat each other. And she knew she would never stand alone. She had allies like Emily Turner beside her, committed to building a better tomorrow for all. This is the story of Nadine Ryan's courage, integrity, and genuine leadership. The woman who dared to confront injustice aboard her own airline flight. If this story touched your heart, remember, sometimes the smallest steps lead to the biggest changes. Share your thoughts in the comment and subscribe and join us for more stories that prove compassion can change the world.